Good evening and welcome to the Town of Rockland Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, January 17, 2023. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Donna, can you start us off?
Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be advised that this open meeting is being broadcast live and recorded for playback by WRPS at youtube.com/WRPSRockland. Please go to www.WRPSRockland.com for further information. First on the agenda, community announcements. Doug.
Thanks, Mike. The only announcement I have tonight is from the town moderator, Kevin Henderson. Asked me to let the public know there are vacancies on both the Finance Committee as well as the Capital Planning Committee. So anybody that's interested in those two very important committees should reach out to the town moderator. You can do that through the town website, or you can just simply call Town Hall here at the town administrator's office, and we'll get you to him. That's all I have.
Okay. Next on the agenda, meeting minutes for 12/14/2022 and 1/3/2023.
Motion to approve the minutes of December 14th, 2022.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I will abstain. Actually, Tiffany, you can't. You weren't here.
Oh, sorry about that one.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? It's unanimous with 2 abstentions, myself and Tiffany. Next on the agenda is the meeting minutes for 1/3/2023. So Kara, you and Lori will have to abstain. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? That's unanimous with 2 abstentions. Okay, next on the agenda, 1-day liquor license request, Sandpaper Factory, 83 East Water Street. Is anybody here from Sandpaper? Come on up. Just right up the seat. Yep. Welcome.
Thanks.
So thanks for coming down. What do you, if you want to just, give us your name and what company you represent? And then
Yeah, so my name is Jason Shaw. I am a member of the Fourth Floors, which resides largely in that building. I also run a small company called Prancing Pig, and I cook in that building. Yeah.
So what's the specific event? When is it? Where is it?
So the event is on February 4th at, I think we're doing 6:30 to 9. And it's a food and art night. So we're going to cook in the kitchen, pass small plates around, and we'd like to have a small bar with just beer and wine.
Okay. What are your expectations for attendance for the
50.
event? 50?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or concerns? All the paperwork looks to be in line.
I have a comment. I just want to say I really support younger generation of people coming up and doing positive things for the town like this. It's really cool. So.
Well, thank you, and thank you for calling me young.
And Mike, they did have on their application 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., so
Yep.
I'd stick with those to give them a little cushion.
Great. Yeah, I'd also like to chime in. Anytime, and there's been a lot of initiatives, but anytime there's an event that helps bring awareness to all of the great artists in Rockland, I fully support it. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you. We hope this is the first of many. There haven't been, there's the 2 open studios each year, but we'd like to find new ways to get people into the building. And so there's 4 artists setting up in the gallery, and then hopefully we can, get some people from around the area, maybe some new people to the building. So.
Chief Zioli, you're not to put you on the spot, but any concerns on this event?
No, I'll listen to it. It's fine. I have no issue with it.
Okay. All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the 1-day liquor license request for the Sandpaper Factory, 83 East Water Street.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Good luck.
Thank you
Good
very
luck.
much. Appreciate it.
All right, Doug, I'm going to skip over the 7:15. We'll try to get a couple other things out of the way. I'm pretty quick on those. So, next on the agenda, Mount Pleasant Cemetery update. Doug?
Sure. So I know that the Board of Selectmen is aware of this, as we've been talking about this issue in executive session for a while now, but I thought it'd be helpful for the public to bring the public up to speed now that a few things have passed. So As folks in the community know, there's a cemetery in town called the Mount Pleasant Cemetery, and it's located in between Liberty Street and Pleasant Street, kind of behind or before, depending on which side you're at, VFW Drive. And it's a very prominent cemetery in town. There's 600 or 700 lots. I think there's probably approximately 1,500 people buried there. And in particular, there's a lot of really prominent veteran graves and veteran markers there. So it's an important cemetery in town. It's private, and the couple that have been the caretakers of the cemetery for many, many years, and they acquired that role from their parents who did it for many years, just like lots of cemeteries in town. They're getting a little bit older. They no longer live in town, and they're just not really physically able to continue to do all the administrative and physical work associated with maintaining that cemetery. So they reached out to me a while ago to see if the town would accept the cemetery, given the fact that they're no longer able to maintain it. We had a lot of discussions. We did encourage them to search for other nonprofit entities that would be able to take it over, because as the board knows, and as everyone here in Town Hall knows, we don't currently have the staff to be able to both handle the administrative work as well as the physical work associated with landscaping, digging graves, burials, etc. But as time went on, and given the extensive work that had been done, there really was no suitable nonprofit partner that would have been a good fit for the town of Rockland and for the demographics in town here that would want to continue to use that cemetery. And just given the way things evolved, we really had no choice but to agree to accept this, understanding there's certain procedures and laws and actions that will have to be done. So as the board knows, we've talked about this in executive session. We have agreed to accept this, obviously contingent on town meeting vote. Town meeting will have to vote to accept this at our annual town meeting in May. So in the interim, we have an agreement in place, an MOU, where we've agreed to take care of the cemetery in the interim between now and then. And there won't be much physically happening because it's generally closed during the winter months. They don't do burials in the winter. And then we'll put it on the town meeting warrant in May for the town to vote. Also, as part of that sense, again, we don't have the infrastructure, the staff to be able to manage this. We've been in discussions with a neighboring town that does have a Department of Public Works with a cemetery division, and they've agreed to help us with the administrative aspects of this, where people will go to inquire about plots available, to make arrangements for burials. And then I think for the time being, we'll continue to use whichever private vendors, private contractors they've used for maintenance and digging graves, et cetera. Over time, we will need to build out our staffing to be able to properly take care of this in-house. And as this neighboring town does it, which is the way most towns do it, it's with the Department of Public Works with a cemetery division. So that's something I'll certainly be recommending to the Charter Review Committee as another example of why I think that would make sense for the town. So more to come for the public. I just felt it appropriate to give them that update, since we have hit a milestone and we do have this temporary agreement in place with the prior caretakers. But we'll be discussing that more as we develop the warrant for the public to hopefully vote to accept this cemetery.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Doug? Any comments? Good? Okay. Next on the agenda, marijuana host community agreements, nonprofit education, and preventative program donations. Doug?
Sure, thank you, Mike. So as the board knows, we have 4 executed host community agreements with marijuana dispensaries. Only 2 of those organizations are actually open for business. Canavana on Weymouth Street and Health Circle on Commerce Road. As part of the host community agreements with both of those entities, they have both agreed to voluntary, and I want to stress the word voluntary, payments, and I'm going to list the specific language in the host community agreements. They're payments for education and prevention programs, including the food pantry, local sports and youth activities, and veterans organizations. And then there's more detail in there about the types of nonprofit entities that would be appropriate for the town to ask them to direct those funds. In the past, we've directed funding toward Rockland Cares and toward High Point Treatment Center in Brockton, since both provide important substance abuse prevention and treatment programs in town. So we currently have $65,000 available in total combined between those two dispensaries. And Jen has been doing quite a bit of work with those nonprofits as well as other department heads and others to figure out really what's the best use of those funds. And we're recommending that we continue directing those funds toward those two organizations, Rockland Cares and the High Point Treatment Center in Brockton. So that's what we're here tonight to recommend.
Okay, any comments, questions from the board? So you said there's $65,000, so I'd assume just do a 50-50 split between the two organizations. Does that make sense?
You good with that, Jen?
Yeah, I would actually ask the board to approve Doug and or I to designate the funds available. I did meet with both High Point and Rockland Cares. Rockland Cares submitted a request that's a bit less than 50-50 split. So if I'm still waiting to hear back from High Point, and I'm just concerned that if High Point has a need for greater amount of funding, that we don't stifle the services they could provide if they had more than the 50%.
So I guess, I mean, obviously Rockland Cares is a much smaller organization than High Point. So I guess my thought would be, seeing as Rockland Cares operates specifically solely in Rockland, for me anyway, I think it makes sense that they get half. I mean, I understand that they only had, $20,000 request or whatever the amount was, but it's going to be a request year after year, and I think that might more directly assist Rockland residents on a direct level. But, I mean, I don't know, it's up to you guys, obviously. I defer to you guys, but if you guys agree with me, I think that would be more the direction that I prefer the conversation kind of go, but,
I think that's
I'll
fine.
defer. I'm
I think that's
comfortable
fine.
deferring to you
and-
guys as well,
yeah.
knowing what the thoughts are.
I had a question. Are there any plans to designate any of the funds toward food pantry, local sports, and youth activities, or veterans organizations?
You want to talk? I mean, we have reached out to the food pantry, for example, and they seem to be very well stocked and well staffed. It seemed to us that the substance abuse prevention was pretty critical, and while we do have these other allowable uses, at this point in time, especially given the kind of less that we're receiving from the opioid settlement than we had hoped, we kind of thought about focusing more toward the substance abuse. But as Mike noted, this is a recurring revenue stream. It's not $65,000 per year. Part of that is from a prior payment. But that's certainly something we can look at more in the future. Or if you want to set aside a portion of this for one of those now, that's your prerogative.
I think deferring to you guys would probably be a good move. And is this like a 5-year limit like it was?
Yeah, so it's limited to the term of the host community agreement, but I should highlight that this is one of the things that new cannabis law that I mentioned earlier repeatedly. I know I've been beating a dead horse with this. Not only is it reducing the amount of funding that we're going to get, the new law expressly prohibits us from having these types of provisions in our host community agreements. So we don't know what the Cannabis Control Commission is going to do with our existing agreements, but in any new agreements, these provisions won't even be in there. So that's just the new law. So it's voluntary, and it is in the current HCA's for 5 years, and that's, given the uncertainty with the state law, that's also part of why I want to make sure we get the funds out the door and to the organizations that need it.
Yeah, is perhaps a benefit on going past the 5 years that maybe the cannabis organizations can get a tax rate?
Yeah, I can't speak to that.
Okay, I'm just planning to see.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, so I think we're pretty much comfortable with you guys dispersing them.
Great, thank you.
Okay, seeing as it's just about 7:15, I'll entertain a motion to enter into the CDBG public hearing. I have a motion? You have a motion? Okay. I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor? Selectman Childs?
Yes.
Selectperson Shortall?
Yes.
Selectperson Needham?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Nyman?
Yes.
And myself. Okay, Wayne, welcome.
Thank you. Wayne Darrah, Community Opportunities Group, the town's community development block grant consultant. We're here tonight to discuss the potential for the town of Rockland to apply for additional community development block grant funds. There's been a little bit of a change this year in terms of the amount of funding that's available. Over the past couple of years, as you know, a lot of additional funds have been coming from the federal government. A lot of the COVID assistance funds were funneled through the CDBG program because it was an established pipeline to communities, which meant DHCD, the organization to which we submit this application, found itself with a lot more money it had to get out the door, and that negatively impacted their ability to do an FY22 funding round. So they set aside their 22 funds and have combined them with their 23 funds. So this year, there's approximately $48 million that's available through the CDBG program. In order to get that money distributed, they've also increased the maximum amounts that communities can apply for. So while the total amount of funding has doubled, they haven't exactly allowed us to double our request. In the past, they've maintained a 2-year maximum award amount of $1.35 million for a single community. So that's what they're setting now for the limit for this grant round. So we've got a little more money to work with than we have in the past when we were limited to $800,000 as a maximum on a single application. Just to kind of, so that's sort of setting the groundwork for where we are right now. Sort of stepping back, I'd like to talk a little bit about the current grants that the town has. Technically, the 2018 grant is still open, but it has been completely expended. Those funds have all been distributed locally. That was a housing rehab program. We also have a 2020 grant. That 2020 grant is a combination of 2 activities. It's more housing rehab units, and it's also a project we did with the Housing Authority to replace all of the windows at Studley Court. So that project is complete. That work is done. The housing rehab program continues. We have quite a few projects in the pipeline. We've completed 6 to date. We've got another half dozen or so that are in the pipeline. So we should be able to reach our goal there without problems. We are still experiencing difficulty with a shortage of contractors, and we are seeing prices for this work just skyrocket. I think that the contractors have so much work in the private sector, and there are still a lot of impacts from COVID with regards to material cost and getting your hands on windows, which are still running 2 to 3 months in some cases, so the supply chain is not ironed out yet. So that's sort of an update on where we are with our current grants. As just a little bit of a primer on the CDBG program, it's a very, very flexible source of funds for local communities. Funds can be used for any number of activities, physical activities such as a housing rehab program, infrastructure improvements, handicap accessibility improvements, can also be used for social services, for planning and design of items that would eventually lead to physical construction in a lot of cases. So while it is a very flexible program in terms of the types of potential projects you can do, you also have to demonstrate that the project you want to do meets a national objective. And there are 3 national objectives: providing benefits to low and moderate income individuals, preventing and eliminating slums and blight, and then there's a critical community caveat that I've never really seen used. It's a very, very special sort of circumstance you'd have to be in to do that. So typically, the majority of our work is done to provide assistance to low and moderate income individuals, which is a requirement. The state as a whole has to spend 70% of its funding towards that national objective. In the past, we've been fairly successful with our grant making. Part of that has to do with a rating and ranking that the state provides to all of the communities. They have created what they call a low and moderate income score. And what they do is determine the percentage of LMI population in every community in the state. And then they break them into percentiles. So on that basis, based on Rockland's percentage of LMI, we score 9 out of 10 possible points on that scale. So that puts us in a very competitive position for this application process, because we'll be competing against communities that might have 7 or 8 out of 10. So we've got a couple points on our competitors. The other aspect of the CDBG program that we need to talk about is the Commonwealth has a set of sustainable development principles. And when we expend CDBG funds, we have to comply with those principles. Typically, that's not a problem for us, because we're not talking about projects that are new construction on, untouched land, which really wouldn't be in conformance with these principles. We're talking about rehabbing existing structures, or if we're not doing an actual physical activity, if we're doing planning work or social services, then these principles really don't apply. So the fact that we might rebuild existing infrastructure or rehab existing homes covers us for compliance with these sustainable development principles. We've had some discussions with town staff, and we've looked at what we have for current requests for additional housing rehab money and or assistance, and based on our waiting list, we think we can demonstrate quite a bit of demand for an additional housing rehab program. Right now, we're budgeting $50,000 per unit, which is the max we can spend on a property without getting permission from DHCD to go over that. So I'm thinking if we, probably thinking about a 15 or 16 unit community housing rehab program, that would be $750,000 or $800,000. The other item that's come up is there's been an interest expressed in trying to provide assistance to businesses along Union Street. I know this is an effort that we've pursued in the past. In the past, we have done a sign and facade program that a number of properties along Union Street took advantage of and participated in. Unfortunately, when you want to do one of those programs, you have to have a current slum and blight inventory. The slum and blight inventory that we did for those programs expired in 2018. They're good for 10 years from the time that DHCD approves them. So the first step we need to take before we can think about doing additional work downtown is to once again prepare a slum and blight inventory. So one of the suggestions that's come up is to seek funding for that activity. And I'm not sure if folks have questions about what I've said so far. There are other issues you want to talk about or suggest?
What is what is the typical max? So you're looking at about $100,000 for the budget for slum and blight for the center?
In the past, they haven't been that much,
Yeah.
but everything is going up. I would say it's probably I've done one recently for another client, and it came in at 83,000. So I think and that was a bigger area than this, so it might be on the order of $65,000-$75,000.
Anybody else have any other questions for Wayne? Lori?
Yeah, I do. So it says a single community application grant maximum $1,350,000. And considering the prices of things are skyrocketing, you're asking for $1,050,000. It's like $300,000 less. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I can explain that. In addition to the amount of funding we can seek, we also have to think about our ability to implement it in a given time frame. Now, again, they've doubled or almost doubled the amount of money you can seek, but they haven't doubled the amount of time they're giving us. So in the past, we've had 18 months to spend our funding. They're only giving us an additional 6 months to spend the additional money. So I think based on our limited pool of contractors, I think there's a physical limit to how many units we can actually get done in that 24-month time period. So I wouldn't want to extend much beyond the 16 or so units that we're considering, because that's what seems reasonable to us to be able to get done in that amount of time.
Makes sense. Any other questions, comments? Okay. All right, Wayne. Okay, so I'll entertain, anybody in the audience have any questions, comments as it pertains to the budgeted CDBG grant? No, seeing none. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to dissolve the public hearing.
Motion to close the CDBG public hearing?
I have a motion, I have a second. Okay, roll call. Selectperson Childs? Yes. Selectperson Shortall? Selectperson Needham? Yes. I got you over there. Vice Chair Nyman?
Yes.
And myself. Okay, public hearing is now dissolved. I'll entertain a motion to approve the application total of $1,050,000.
Well, actually, could I ask you to
Absolutely.
do it up to 1.35
Okay.
for the activities of a housing rehab program and a slum and blight inventory? Just so those are kind of preliminary budget numbers. I want to be able to have the ability to adjust them up or down.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion for the 1.35.
So moved.
All right, so I have a motion to approve the application total for the CDBG grant at $1.35 million. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, roll call. Selectperson
Yes.
Childs, Selectperson Shortall,
Yes.
Selectperson Needham,
Yes.
Vice Chair Nyman,
Yes.
and myself. Wayne, you guys are all set? Christine,
Excellent.
thank you guys. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Keep it up. Very valuable service to the town. Okay, next on the agenda, Town Administrator Review Process. Doug?
Did you do the single waiver request?
Yeah. Should we just jump into
Yeah,
that?
why
Oh,
don't we
did you
do
ha-
that?
did I see
Yeah,
it?
'cause
Did
there's
I miss
a
it?
second item.
Oh, sorry, I had to cross, my line went right through it.
So this is a kind of a standard thing when they have a
Yep.
project that goes over the cap, and as Wayne just said, costs have gone up, as everybody understands with construction, but I'll turn it over to Wayne to give any additional detail on this waiver request.
Okay, Wayne,
So,
floor is yours again.
This is the case where we've put a full project out to bid. I mean, we knew there was a substantial amount of work. Our rehab specialist estimate was in the $63,000 range. We actually received 3 bids on the project, ranging from $71,850 to $82,000. We thought about rebidding this project, trying to take some of the work out of it, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of this money is for lead paint related work, and there's really no way for us to avoid that. We're required under CDBG to address lead paint, and if we took any, at the end of the day, all we would be doing is lead paint if we tried to cut this project at all. So we thought it was best to go forward with the bids that we received and seek a waiver of $75,000, so we could accept the low bid of $71,850. And that gives us a little room if we come, if there's a change order or something that pops up, we won't have to come back and get an increase on the waiver.
Okay.
This is, it's an elderly homeowner living on their own, so.
Okay, I have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the request for a waiver of $75,000 for CDBG.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Motion and a second. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Next on the agenda, Town Administrator Review Process. Doug?
Thanks, Mike. So the purpose of this discussion is just to confirm the process for doing my performance evaluation, and for those in the public that may not have seen this in prior years, it's a little awkward because we do things in public meetings, but obviously a performance review can be an awkward thing to do in a public meeting. So what we have in your binder is a memo from Town Council, which outlines a process that's fair to the board, fair to me as the employee, and also makes sure that everyone fully complies with the open meeting law. So just as a quick review of this memo, the process that we're recommending we continue with is for the HR director to distribute a copy of the review tool, the instrument. I would then do a self-assessment and give it to all of you. You would then individually fill out your review of me. So again, individually, not at a public meeting. You should then send your individual review directly to Town Council, where he will collate those. And he also did include in this memo that he encourages each of you to meet with me individually to have a frank, private discussion, say what's working well, what concerns you may have, things like that. Then once Town Council gets all 5 of your reviews, he'll then collate it and do what he calls a consensus. So just a single document that reflects the consensus of all 5 of you, and then that document would then be discussed at a future Board of Selectmen meeting in public, and that document would be a public document. So it's the same process we've done before, and I should highlight that we're fortunate to have John Clifford as Town Council, because I'm an active member in the Mass Managers Association, and he's done presentations to the statewide group of managers outlining the best practices in doing performance reviews for town administrators, and it's exactly what he's recommending we do. So we are following the best practice. So unless you have any questions, I'd recommend we continue that going forward this year.
So the information should be out from Stacy at some point this week. My hope would be that everybody can have their reviews turned back into Town Council by February 6th. Initially, I think I had said January 31st, but I think 2 weeks might be cutting it a little bit close, seeing as they haven't got the materials yet. Lori and Donna, the part where Doug said about specifically going in and sitting with him and expressing your concerns, this was a commitment that I made, that Kara made a couple years back, along with the other members of the board at the time, because the review process really didn't exist within the town. We asked that the town administrator review all the employees within the town that report directly to them, and our singular job is to review the town administrator. This is the opportunity to sit down and have whatever frank conversation that needs to be had, or to let them know what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and it's really a good conversation, because you really get an idea of how decisions were made and what led them to that decision. If you had questions or concerns over decisions that were made, it's a good opportunity to speak about it, and then when Town Council gets the information back, then we'll read it at the public meeting, but it will be a consensus of the board, not just specific individual thoughts. So,
Can I add one more thing, Mike,
Yep.
to follow up on what you just said? As I mentioned, I'm very active in the state association, and the thing, and I'm also a member of the International Association too, and the thing that I've realized is when communities get in trouble, either with boards that are not satisfied with the manager or managers that aren't happy with their board, it almost always seems to be because of a breakdown in communication. And generally, performance reviews hadn't been done in those communities, and so assumptions get made and resentments might build up, and then things get to a point where things get bad. And so by doing a performance review every year, it just makes sure, I think that we have we do communicate well, but this kind of puts some structure and process to it, and it puts it in writing.
It forces the conversation.
Forces the conversation, and I think it's good
so.
for both parties. So.
But, okay, anybody have any questions, concerns?
Do we need to formally vote on this process, or?
No,
just in place?
it's already been voted.
Okay.
Okay, next on the agenda, other new business not reasonably anticipated?
I have none.
Okay, old business, American Rescue Plan Act, opera update. Doug?
Thanks, Mike. So this should be a relatively quick update. I put in your packet the most recent ARPA listing that I've provided to you. And again, ARPA is the American Rescue Plan Act. It's federal funds related to recovering from the pandemic. Again, there's two sources of ARPA funding. NEU, which is non-entitlement unit, which just means money that we get directly from the federal government. That totaled approximately 1.88 million. And then there's a second part of the ARPA funding which flows through Plymouth County. Plymouth County elected to request that funding from the federal government, and then they are overseeing calculating allocations and overseeing the process for towns to request the, pieces or the total amount of their allocation through a very formalized process. So the reason why I'm here is to update you on two things. One is if you go kind of toward the bottom of the sheet under Community and Economic Development, you'll see that the board had previously allocated $60,000 for storefront design guidelines on Union Street and $140,000 for the storefront facade renovations. Jen has worked tirelessly, as she always does, and has received a grant. It's from the state that's going to offset, should entirely offset the design portion of that work. So what we'd like to do is to essentially roll that 60,000 into the 140,000 below. So it'd be a total of 200,000, which will help us beef up the grant program that we want to roll out to help the businesses on Union Street make those renovations and improvements. Then the second item, and I guess maybe before I move on, does that seem okay? No issues with that? All right, great. The second issue is I attended a webinar with all the other town managers in Plymouth County with the county treasurer and county commissioners to talk about the county allocation. And I put in your packet, this was actually a screenshot that I took off my computer during the webinar, but I have confirmed since the time that I took the screenshot and put it in your packet that it has since become final. So the numbers are the same for us. So the main point here is that our guaranteed allocation has changed. It has dropped, and I want to explain why. So you'll see highlighted in yellow is Rockland. And you'll see the first two phases, which were indicated to be 25% of our total amount, was listed at $847,190.64. So when you take that number, which is a quarterly amount, times 4, that's how you got to the 3.388 million, which is on the page before at the top that showed the county number, right? So that's what we've been working on. What the county's decided to do, and I believe that it's also highlighted in yellow, is they're reducing each town's guaranteed individual allotment in phase 3. Phase 4, they're keeping the same. So, and I'll explain why they're dropping it. But now if you look at our total allocation on the right-hand side, and I apologize, it's a little fuzzy, it's $3,231,745. So it's a drop of about a little over $157,000. So what the county's doing, you'll see under that Part 3 column, is they put in the words regional requests. So everybody's allocation is being proportionally reduced, and they're setting that aside because they want to encourage regional requests.
So they didn't have that in their mind when they initially told us the money we were going to be getting?
Yeah, I can't
So
speak.
they offered the money and then they took it away because they had pet projects in the region?
Yeah, so I guess I would say that we're fortunate that we have a joint waterworks
Yep.
with the town of Abington. So personally, right out of the gate, I'm thinking we should look at a water request, since that should be, it's water projects are explicitly authorized. We know we got a lot of needs, and it's a regional request. So unless and if we get if Jen and I have other ideas for other regional requests, I'll certainly bring them to your attention, but
Doug,
that was something that
when did the number first come out for our county?
the 847,000 came out.
No, the first, when we were first told that it was going to be 3.388764.
I mean, it was at really the very I'd have to go back and
Yeah.
check how many months or, probably more than a year ago now at this point. I mean, to be fair to the county, that they may very well have said from the beginning, you know, this is your first quarterly payment, this will be your second, this is the plan, plans are subject to change. That, you know, I don't want to,
Did they vote on it in a meeting, or? of
I
the
assume they
commissioners?
did.
Yeah.
I assume that that was a vote of the commissioners, would be my guess. And, you know, who knows? I don't know the details yet of how they're going to handle the regional allocations, but maybe, I'm just throwing this out there, maybe it's possible that if other communities can't come up with ideas for regional requests, and we have a lot of needs with our regional water system, maybe we'll make out better in the end.
Well, I think
I
we
don't
saw
know,
that.
I'm just throwing that out
We
there.
saw that with the CARES Act, where a lot of communities, you know,
Right.
sat back and they didn't submit the applications, and we were aggressive with getting the applications submitted, and I think we ended up doing more than what initially.
Right,
But
that's right.
I'm just not, you know, again, I mean, we've talked about this before, I'm not a fan of being told something, budgeting for it, and then being told you have less than you budgeted for.
I hear you. And it's, you know, it's an interesting dynamic. I think that there's many managers in the county that are, I don't want to say frustrated, because that's a little too strong a word, but, you know, they're aware that there's a lot of hoops that the county, you know, makes us jump through to get these funds, because the county is taking all the accountability and all the responsibility for reporting to the feds. So once the county approves it, we're off the hook. They have all that extensive reporting, and right, so that's there. Also, I just want to highlight, there's some other counties, like in Barnstable County, where they're giving very little to individual towns. The county's keeping the money basically for themselves and doing county-related projects. So we're lucky that in Plymouth County, except for some, you know, a small percentage toward administration, things that they're holding back, for the most part, they're funneling all these funds back to all the cities and towns proportionally based on population. So it's, you know, I do want to give them credit where credit's due for that. But yeah, you know, again, Mike, I don't want to really sell them too short, because I'd have to go back to prior meetings which weren't recorded to know they may have had a caveat about, you know, numbers subject to change. But it is a 157,000 reduction in what's guaranteed, but like I said, who knows, maybe we'll make out better regionally.
Okay.
And then the last piece related to ARPA that I wanted just to highlight is another change the county is doing is, if you recall, under our direct non-entitlement unit funding, we were able to claim it as revenue replacement, lost revenue, and that has, under the more recent federal rules, given us more flexibility in uses. So it's not strictly limited toward water and sewer and broadband, but any other legitimate governmental purpose, and that's what we've done with some of those other items, you know, that you see listed here. The county, up until now, has not authorized any revenue replacement category items, because the way the federal rules were written, it's a big county, a lot of towns, it just wouldn't have worked. Those rules, again, have changed at the federal level, and the county is now entertaining requests for the towns, if you look at each town's allocation, to say, you know, we want our whatever phase 3 or phase 4 to be considered revenue replacement and not project by project based. But they're only doing that based on a town's request for it. So I'm requesting that, because that will give us more flexibility on more allowable uses. So it's not going to, it won't hurt us in any way. It's only going to help us. And so that's just an additional change I wanted you to be aware of. That and I don't think it's 100% yet, but I do think it's very, very, very likely that we'll be able to use the revenue replacement category for some of these phase 3 or phase 4 amounts, which is a good thing. And that's all I have on ARPA.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, next on the agenda, FY24 budget. Doug?
So I actually have no updates on that. I'll keep putting the budget on every agenda just in case new things come up. I can say that we have met with the Finance Committee, the town accountant and I. We had a good meeting with them, and part of what we explained is what we talked about here at the last meeting, which is with a new administration delaying their budget coming out. It's really going to kind of compress our budget time frame, and most likely March is going to be an extremely busy month. So that's really all I have for tonight.
Okay. Other old business not reasonably anticipated.
I have none.
Okay, number 6, town administrator's report and correspondence. Doug?
Thanks, Mike. So I have a bunch of things to update you all on tonight. The first is that our Assistant Veteran Services Officer, Stephen Joyce, has just resigned. And I want to thank Steve for all of his work. Steve is a veteran. He was very dedicated to this job, and you know, we are sorry to see him go. This was Steve's choice, you know. I think ultimately this particular job just wasn't the best fit for him, and we certainly want to wish him well in the future. He's not going to leave us high and dry. He'll make sure to help us with the transition. But there is a really good silver lining to this. Times have changed since we had hired Tim, and the good news is that our part-time department head, who's the main Veteran Services Officer, Tim White, Tim is going to be able to work for us full-time now, 5 days a week.
Excellent.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, again, this was not a
long
grand
enough.
scheme
Yeah.
plan, you know. He wasn't, as everyone knows, he was working in another, still is working in another town and was splitting his duties and wasn't really able to leave that other town. That's why we hired Steve. But since that time, things have changed. He's now able to commit to us full-time, 5 days a week, and we're in the process of making that happen. So it's a real good silver lining. So I wanted to update you all on that, and I think veterans are going to continue to get excellent services 5 days a week at our Veterans Office. Next, I wanted to mention that the custodian at the police department, Richard Welch, is retiring. I want to thank him for his many years of service. He's worked for the police department for nearly 20 years, and that included COVID and all kinds of other, you know, difficult assignments there. So I want to thank Mr. Welch for his service to the police department. Next, I wanted to highlight that we've been talking about the billboard that's being proposed. The State Department of Transportation's Office of Outdoor Advertising has still not made a decision, and not only have they not made a decision, they don't even have a time frame for when they will make a decision, and there's apparently no regulations or laws or rules that govern that. Mike and I did have a meeting, excuse me, just last week with the developers, just to talk about what this process and path forward might look like. So Mike did send a letter to the state, which I do want to give each of you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so you have a copy of it. And I'm also going to hand out one other item too, so I don't have to get it twice. Take one of these down, and then take one of those. So Mike sent this letter to both the executive director of the DOT's Office of Outdoor Advertising and the secretary of the Department of Transportation. We've also been continuing to liaise with our state rep and state senator. Again, we're not trying to pressure Mass DOT to approve the particular project that we want, but we are urging them to make a decision, because it's really not fair to anyone to keep that in limbo. So that's the update on the billboard. Next, I don't have any details other than just a general heads up for all of you that I've been working with the animal control officer, and he's brought to my attention a very disturbing situation with a home in Rockland with a dangerous dog that has repeatedly bit people, and most recently a child pretty severely. So I am the town's municipal hearing officer. The board designated both Jen and me in those positions a year or two ago at least. So we will be conducting a dangerous dog hearing. I met with the animal control officer today and town council just to make sure that we're following every proper procedure under Mass General Law and how those are conducted. So I'll give you more information once that's finalized and the date is set, and I just wanted to give you a heads up about that. Also, I had a very productive meeting with Lori and the town accountant with the sewer commissioners last week. It was intended, they requested that we be there to talk a bit about their projected financing needs for improvements to the sewer plant. And in particular, they really wanted to try to understand the financial impact of a very large project. The number that was thrown out was an $80 million project, and what that would look like kind of doing that all at once. And as we talked it through, we explained that a project like that, where there's no guaranteed state match like there is with school projects with the MSBA, that the financial impact of something that large all at once is really just not realistic. And so the more we talked about specific numbers and what that would look like on rates, they agreed, they understood. So they are going back now and looking at options with their engineers to potentially phase the project into pieces over a longer period of time so that they can prioritize on the most important things first, get things accomplished while spreading it out over a period of time to also make it affordable, which it has to be or it can't get done. So there'll be much more to come on that in the future, but I wanted to let you know about that meeting. Next, regarding the fire station, proposed fire station building project. As we speak right now, that special permit public hearing with the Zoning Board of Appeals is going on. And just to stress again for the public, this project has not been approved yet. It has not been presented to voters yet. Should the board decide to put it on the ballot and put it on the warrant, it is ultimately up to voters to decide whether that gets approved or not. But the architect and engineers that we've engaged with, that contract does include getting us through the ZBA special permit because that's an important milestone and we want to make sure we're able to get through that before it gets presented to voters. Related to that project, we have consolidated all the information related to it in one place on the town website. So it includes PowerPoint presentations, response time studies from the consultants, all the information, the plans, the designs that are being shown to the ZBA tonight, links to videos from the public outreach meeting, the interview I did with the chief, as well as renderings of what the building potentially could look like. So if anybody just goes to the town website, go to the fire department page, and on the left-hand side, you'll see a link for the fire station building project. I also pushed it out on social media later this afternoon, so folks might see that on Facebook or Twitter. Also related to the fire department, I wanted to mention that I attended as an observer an active shooter training that they did late last week, and some of you may have attended it on a different day. I'm not sure if you did or not, but it was really, I don't even know what the right words are to say, because impressive or powerful aren't even really strong enough, but it was amazing. So it was at the Memorial Park School, which is slated to be demolished very soon, so it was a perfect time to have kind of a more aggressive training where they didn't have to worry about damaging anything. They had Rockland police officers, and they had external trainers in, and they were simulating a potentially terrible situation with an active shooter in the school. But it was extremely realistic. There were noises, there were people role-playing incredibly realistically at all different ages, and really pretty, again, I'm sorry, I'm like struggling for the right words because it was a very difficult thing to witness, and just horrible that we as a nation and as a society now, like fire drills, now we have to practice for shooters in schools. It's just hard to imagine. But the thing that really struck me was, as there's the officers there and there's all the firefighters, and I think there were representatives from 10 different communities. It was a regional exercise. Not Rockland was the biggest part, but there were from, I think, 9 other communities. All the firefighters had tactical gear on, bulletproof vests, the helmets, and as they're, they're going in behind the police officers. And I talked to one of the firefighters in between the exercises, and I asked him, are you going to be scared in an active scene where there's an active shooter to go in and do this work? And he was, and I know who it is, but I'm not going to mention his name, not to embarrass him, but he looked me right in the eye and he said, no. He said, the police are in front of us. We have all of our tactical gear on. We go into fires. If there's an incident like this and we get called in, we're going in. And it's just makes me proud to be associated with a town like this and with the men and women and the police and now the fire department that are going into active hostile scenes like this. So I just want to thank them for everything that they do. So I should have probably reorganized this because that's a strong enough thing to close on, but I do want to just quickly mention 3 other things if I can. The Recreation Department's Community Center feasibility study that we're working on, they're going to have a public outreach meeting on Monday night, January 30th at 6:30 at the high school lecture hall. And that will be kind of similar to what we did with the fire department, although they're not as far along in the process. So this is really stepping back even further, engaging the community to get a sense of what do you want in a recreation center? What do you want in a community center? What types of things do you want to help them guide their preliminary design before they go back to the community again? Two more things. One is, we talked about the marijuana donations earlier. I just want to put a bug in your ear, or whatever the expression is, for you to think about potentially capping the number of dispensaries we have in town. So we have 2 that are open, and we have 2 more that are already approved. So there's potential to have 4 open in town. And a concern I have is any more than that, I'm afraid, might not generate any more income to the town, but if anything, might harm the existing ones that are there and just cannibalize sales, and we really might not see any growth. So, sure.
Are any of these grow houses, or are they just all dispensaries?
It's the 2 that we have are just dispensaries.
Well, the potential ones that are coming in.
No, I don't think there's, I don't believe there's
I don't think
cultivation.
cultivation is part of
Yeah.
it. I would say though, I agree that it would definitely water down or oversaturate the market. However, I think we should allow for the caveat, and I'm not a huge fan, and I think if the host community agreements go away, then it makes a little bit less sense. But seeing as currently, like, we should leave language in there that the current zoning is only in the hotel district. If zoning were to open up at some point to multiple areas in town, I mean, if we had one on the Abington-Rockland line over there, it's going to be less of an effect on the current ones that exist as it would on, another town, another community.
Sure.
So I think language like that might be
Nope,
appropriate.
that's fine. Again, this is just something for you to think about, and as we get over the coming months where we think about warrant articles, if it's something you don't even want to entertain, we
Yeah.
don't have to do anything. But if you have ideas like that, that can certainly be worked into it as well, absolutely. But this type of thing would be done through a bylaw at town meeting, so that's why I'm kind of just having you think about it now. And then lastly, I am going to the MMA's annual conference on Friday and Saturday at the end of this week. I think Lori's going, I'm not sure if anyone else is. Just want to let you know I'll be out of the office Friday, and I'll be at the conference Friday and Saturday. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Selectmen's comments. Comments and opinions expressed by individual members do not necessarily reflect the views of the Board of Selectmen and are the opinions and comments of only the individual member. Select Person Childs.
Yeah, I just want to thank Stephen Joyce for his service and congratulate Tim White and thank Richard Welch as well. Also, I went to the ribbon cutting ceremony for the new elementary school, and it was exciting to see Phelps Elementary up and running, finished ahead of time and under budget. It's a smart school. It's an adaptable design that takes into account the students' individual learning preferences. It stimulates interplay between the students' own initiatives and curiosity play and learning, as well as activities that the teachers put on a curriculum. And my favorite part of the school is the circular design that provides a central community gathering point. And it's really lovely to see Rockland's education curriculum forge into the future. So it's really nice to see Rockland moving forward instead of just kind of not. So I wanted to mention that. And congratulations to the huge team it took to get this done. I also want to remind people that nomination papers are available for the election coming up in April, and I encourage you to consider running, especially for unopposed positions, because this widens the spectrum of choice we have at the polls. There's openings, I know, on nominations for the Sewer Commission, Water Commission, the Board of Health particularly. And papers are available in the clerk's office where you can learn about the election procedures. I think February 16th is the last day to obtain nomination papers, and the 20th is the last day of February is the last day to return them. So I encourage everybody to step up if you can. I know on Facebook there's a lot of opinions, a lot of very heated opinions at times, but to really learn about where your money's going and how the town operates, I encourage you to step up, and especially for the finance committee, because that's where you can really learn the building blocks of
Thank you, Lori. Selectperson Shortall?
Sorry. I would like to encourage everyone to make sure that you respond to your census. You were talking before about numbers in town. People don't understand generally how important it is that you report every person in your house, because it makes a difference when the state is looking at population in town. Some people think that, oh, well, you knew last year, so you don't need to know this year. You do, because every single person needs to be counted so that we have accurate figures, so that we're preparing for the population in town. So, when you get your census, please send it back. We used to hound people throughout the whole year. I also want to thank all of the first responders. They do a fantastic job. We have an excellent crew in this town, and I'm very glad to think that if anything happened, I know these guys will be there. Guys and women will be there to back us up. So, thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Selectperson Needham?
I also attended the Phelps opening ceremony, and I just wanted to share that it was inspiring. It was absolutely inspiring to see our community come together in celebration of the possibilities of our kids. And it was also very impactful to be able to see Mr. Phelps and his family be given the naming rights of the school that's incredibly earned. And so it was a very powerful day, and the best is yet to come with that school. I also would like to thank Stephen Joyce and Mr. Welch, and congratulate Tim White.
Thank you, Tiffany. Vice Chairman Nyman?
Just want to officially congratulate Officer Sue Llewellyn on her retirement from the Rockland Police Department. The chairman and I were present at her retirement party last Friday. It was well attended. I just want to wish her well in her retirement and hope it's a healthy and long retirement for her. I will also be attending the MMA annual conference on Friday, so looking forward to connect and network with other local leaders around the state.
Thank you, Kara. So it's basically been said by everybody already, but the Phelps Elementary ribbon cutting ceremony was truly the culmination of a lot of years of hard work by a lot of good people in this town. I particularly want to highlight the school committee, the school building committee, but especially our former colleague, Rich Penny, who hates the spotlight and hates the accolades, and I think his face was red the entire night. But he did a great job at bringing that project home under budget and ahead of schedule. So with that, it's a school that the community will enjoy for a long time to come. Also announced that I will have office hours here at Town Hall next Tuesday, 10 to 12 up here. Is this room available?
Sure.
Sure, okay, all right. So next Tuesday, January 24th, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. for any residents that have any questions or concerns that just want to sit down and talk. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
I got a motion, do I have a second? Motion and a second, all those in favor, Selectperson Childs?
Yes.
Selectperson Shortall?
Yes.
Selectperson Needham?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Nyman?
Yes.
And myself. Thank you, everyone, good night.